The first time Rowan Vale stopped chasing me, I nearly walked straight into a closing security gate. Not because I missed him. That would have been ridiculous. I'd spent 3 weeks avoiding Northbridge Academy's strongest alpha, while half the campus seemed determined to get 5 minutes of his attention. I changed breakfast times. I took the longer corridor to tactical theory. Once, I climbed 4 flights of stairs because I saw Rowan waiting beside the elevator. And every time I changed direction, somehow, eventually, he appeared again. Until Monday, I left tactical theory at 10:17, took the east corridor, and looked automatically toward the windows. Empty. No Rowan leaning against the stone column. No quiet morning. Nothing. I told myself that was good. Then I checked the courtyard. Also empty. That was how I almost lost a shoulder to the gate. Move, Eli. I slipped through before it locked and glared at Mason, who had caught it with one hand. I was moving. You were searching for the exit. Mason looked behind me. Sure. I kept walking. I had 12 minutes to reach response practicum, and unlike certain genetically blessed alpha celebrities, I couldn't stroll in late and call it mysterious. Rowan was already inside when I arrived. He stood at the opposite tactical station, sleeves pushed up, listening to instructor Hale. He didn't look at me. That should have made concentrating easier. Instead, when Hale assigned paired simulations and called, Vale, Mercer, I missed the next 3 words. Rowan crossed the room and stopped on the other side of my console. Not beside me. Not close enough to crowd me. You want deployment or response? He asked. I stared at him. For weeks, Rowan had acted as if proximity were a problem he could solve through persistence. Now he was asking which half of a simulation I wanted. Deployment. Okay. No teasing. No argument. He took response. Hale activated the scenario. 2 teams trapped in a training sector, 1 evacuation route, 90 seconds before the simulated lockdown. I pushed the first unit east. Rowan redirected the second without touching my controls. West route's faster, he said. It bottlenecks at 40 seconds. You counted. Last run. I checked the timing data. He was right. Annoying. Useful but annoying. Hold team 2 for 6 seconds. Rowan did it immediately. We cleared both teams with 11 seconds left. Hale glanced at our score. Best run this morning. There it was, my first reward for not simply walking away from Rowan. Evidence that whatever else existed between us, he respected my competence when something real was at stake. I hated how much that complicated things. After practicum, I packed quickly. Rowan stepped aside before I could ask him to move. You're not following me? The question escaped before I could stop it. One eyebrow lifted. Was I supposed to? Heat climbed my neck. No, then no. I shoved my tablet into my bag. Great. You sound disappointed. I sound relieved. Right. That tiny almost smile was the first familiar thing I'd seen from him all day. Then he walked away first. I stood there irritated at him for leaving, which was objectively unfair and therefore even more irritating. The problem wasn't that Rowan had stopped. The problem was that I didn't know why. 3 days earlier, outside the library, I had finally told him, if I change routes to avoid you, maybe take the hint. Rowan had gone completely still. Then he'd asked, you really want me to stop? I'd said yes before he finished the question. At the time, the answer had felt clean. Distance meant control. If I never needed anyone to back off, nobody got the chance to decide my boundaries were negotiable. Monday should have proved the strategy worked. Instead, Rowan's absence followed me more effectively than Rowan ever had. At lunch, I caught myself looking across the quad for him. Later, I took the library route I had avoided for weeks. He wasn't there. I slowed anyway. That was when I noticed the folded practicum sheet tucked into the outer pocket of my bag. My score sheet. I must have left it at the station. Across the top, beside Hale's evaluation, someone had written one short note in Rowan's blocky handwriting. Mercer caught the west bottleneck before I did. Use his call on deployment timing. I read it twice. Rowan hadn't waited for gratitude. He'd made sure Hale knew which part of the result belonged to me, then disappeared. It didn't fit the alpha I decided liked the chase because persistence would eventually become permission. But one decent note didn't erase 3 weeks of unwanted attention. Evidence wasn't absolution. At 4:06, my phone buzzed. A message from Mason. You heard about Vale? I stopped walking. Another message appeared before I could answer. He withdrew from the alpha ranking exhibition. This morning, Rowan had trained for that exhibition all term. Everyone knew it. More importantly, Withdrawing meant giving up the exact public competition people had been chasing him over for weeks. I typed why. Mason's reply came almost immediately. No idea. Hale looked furious. Thought you might know. I didn't. And that bothered me more than it should have. I looked toward the library entrance, the place Rowan had been waiting 3 days ago when I told him to stop chasing me. For the first time since then, I wondered whether I had misunderstood what he had actually been chasing. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Rowan. One sentence. We need to change tomorrow's practicum plan. Hale paired us again. I could have told Hale to switch partners. That was the obvious move. Clean distance. No mixed signals. Instead, I opened our simulation data and typed, "Send me what you found." The reply came seconds later. Not over text. There's something wrong with the lockdown timing. And just like that, avoiding Rowan was no longer the simplest option. Rowan's message should have made my decision easy. Something was wrong with the lockdown timing. Fine. We could report it to Hale, get tomorrow's practicum adjusted, and go back to not following each other through hallways. Instead, at 7:10 the next morning, I was standing outside the simulation lab with Rowan and wondering when "Send me what you found" had turned into voluntarily meeting him before breakfast. "You came," he said. "We're assigned partners." That wasn't an answer. "It's the only one you're getting." Rowan accepted that and unlocked the practice console with the access Hale had already given our team for the week. He pulled up yesterday's run. Watch the west sector. At 40 seconds, the evacuation route should have locked. Our station received the warning 3 seconds late. Rowan pulled 2 older runs. Same delay. Always west sector. 3 seconds sounded small until you remembered a tighter run could fail an entire team. Yesterday's perfect score suddenly looked less like a clean victory and more like something we'd survived without knowing the rules had shifted underneath us. "Did you tell Hale?" I asked. "Not yet." My head snapped toward him. "Why not?" "Because I wanted to know whether it was our console first." There it was, the part of Rowan I distrusted. He saw a problem and decided he should handle it before anyone else got involved. "So you withdrew from the ranking exhibition because of this?" Partly. Partly isn't an answer. I know. He closed the log. I felt my patience go with it. Then Hale can deal with it. I reached for my bag. Distance. Authority. Clean lines. If Rowan wanted to keep half an explanation to himself, I wasn't going to stand there and become part of whatever private mission he'd invented. "Eli." "What?" "If we report a malfunction without proving where it starts, they shut down our station and reset it." "Good." "And erase the local diagnostic history." My hand stopped on the strap. That was information I actually had to account for. "You know that how?" "Hale made me assist with resets last term. I broke one." "Of course you did." "It was educational." Against my better judgment, I almost smiled. "Almost." 5 minutes, I said. "We verify whether it's local. Then we tell Hale." Rowan nodded. "Your call." That mattered. I hated that it mattered. We ran one clean diagnostic. The West warning arrived late again, while the other commands matched. "It isn't the console," I said. Rowan stopped short of my side of the controls. "Upstream. Has to be." I copied the discrepancy before anything could reset. That was my choice, not Rowan's, and it changed the problem from a bad workstation to something higher in the system. "Now we tell Hale," I said. Rowan didn't argue. That should have reassured me. Instead, outside the lab, 2 first-year alphas were waiting for him. One held an exhibition roster. "Vale, is it true you dropped out?" Rowan's shoulders tightened. "Yeah." "Why?" "You were seated first. Changed priorities." The student looked genuinely offended on behalf of the entire academy. "People trained all term to face you." Rowan handed the roster back. "Then they can face each other." He walked away. They stared after him. I did too. For weeks, I'd assumed Rowan enjoyed being the center of that gravity. Watching him leave it voluntarily should have been satisfying. Instead, it made his withdrawal harder to explain. Hale studied our evidence, swore under his breath, and locked the simulation room. Nobody runs West Sector drills until systems checks it. He told Rowan he should have reported it yesterday, then asked what I would have done if Rowan had investigated alone. Let him. Hale's expression flattened. That's not teamwork. Irritation hit first because it was easier than admitting he had a point. I had gotten so good at distance I was willing to leave a real safety problem entirely in Rowan's hands just to preserve it. The cost arrived 10 minutes later. Hale reassigned our afternoon practicum to a joint diagnostic review. No partner switch. No clean exit. Because I had chosen to stay long enough to verify the delay, I was now officially responsible for helping trace it. Rowan caught up with me outside. You can ask Kael to replace you. I looked at him. You want that? Doesn't matter what I want. That answer irritated me for a completely different reason. Stop doing that. Doing what? Acting like you suddenly don't have opinions. Rowan was quiet for a beat. You told me to stop chasing you. I'm trying to make sure I understand what stop means. The words landed harder than I wanted them to. I looked away. It means don't decide for me. Okay. It doesn't mean become a wall. Another pause. Okay. Quit saying okay. That one feels difficult to comply with. I laughed once before I could prevent it. Rowan's mouth curved, but he didn't push. No flirtation. No victory lap. Just enough of the old friction to remind me why being around him had never been simple. At 2, Hale gave us the released controller records. I tracked the delays while Rowan compared sessions. The pattern appeared fast. Every affected exercise involved Rowan, including sessions before he was paired with me. My first instinct was familiar. Rowan was the common factor, so distance still looked safest. Then he pointed to the manual correction field. Every delayed warning had eventually been cleared under the same instructor authorization. Hales. For the first time, the problem wasn't simply that Rowan was connected to the failures. Someone else had already known they were happening. And before I could decide what that meant, the lab door opened behind us. Instructor Hale stepped inside, saw the record on my screen, and said, "Mercer, don't close that file." Hale didn't look surprised to see his authorization code on the screen. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that Rowan noticed too. "Mercer, don't close that file," Hale repeated. I kept my hands on the console. Wasn't planning to. Good. Copy the affected entries to the review folder. Rowan shifted beside me. You already knew about the delays. Hale's jaw tightened. I knew warnings were being cleared manually. I didn't know they were consistently attached to your exercises. But that's your authorization. I pointed at the record. Hale came closer. Because I'm the one who cleared them after they appeared on my monitor. That answered one question without answering the larger one. Hale hadn't created the delay. At least the log didn't prove he had. He'd been correcting it. Why didn't you report it? I asked. I did. Twice. Systems classified both incidents as synchronization errors because the warnings corrected before anyone failed a drill. And you kept running Rowan through them? My tone came out sharper than I intended. Hale looked at me. The errors weren't dangerous under instructor supervision. And until you two found the timing pattern, I had no evidence they were connected. I wanted to argue. Instead, I looked back at the dates. Every delayed command involved Rowan. Every manual correction came afterward. Cause first. Hale's intervention second. Whatever was happening, Rowan wasn't simply dragging me into another problem he thought he could handle alone. He'd noticed something everyone else had dismissed. That was inconvenient evidence. I want the raw session records, I said. Hale folded his arms. Why? Because the pattern changes depending on who's paired with him. If I can compare command timing against partner assignments, we can tell whether Rowan triggers it just by being in the exercise or whether something else does. Rowan glanced at me. You believe me now? I believe timestamps. Romantic. Don't ruin it. Hale almost smiled, then granted us read-only access to the archived sessions. That changed my plan. 10 minutes ago, I'd been ready to hand the problem over and walk away. Now I was the one pulling records. Not because I trusted Rowan. Because I trusted evidence, and the evidence had stopped cooperating with the story I preferred. We worked fast. The break in the pattern was simple. In most affected sessions, Rowan left his assigned position to cover a partner's sector, and the warning appeared immediately after. You kept leaving your lane. When somebody was going to get boxed in, old me had the easy interpretation ready. Rowan saw someone move away and followed because he thought he knew better, but the records complicated it. Some partners had explicitly requested help. In another run, Rowan stayed put until Hale ordered him across. He wasn't treating every boundary the same. I hated that distinction because it forced one onto my own experience. What? Rowan asked. Nothing. That was definitely a something. I'm thinking. Dangerous hobby. I gave him a look. He went back to the records, and, more importantly, let me think. A training log didn't erase 3 weeks of unwanted attention. He should have noticed my avoidance sooner. I still believe that. But after I finally said stop, he had stopped completely. The contradiction stayed unresolved, and I wasn't ready to turn evidence into forgiveness. I need to test something, I said. Then yesterday's run gave us the cleaner clue. The warning had appeared not when Rowan entered my sector, but when he changed his expected response timing because I told him to. Older sessions showed the same pattern. So it's not simply Vale moving, Hale said. It's Vale deviating from the predicted route, I answered. Maybe. Don't outrun the evidence. Fair. We had a direction now, not an answer. Hale sent the records to systems and ordered us out of the lab until they could isolate the controller process. In the corridor, Rowan fell into step beside me, then seemed to remember himself and slowed. I noticed. You can walk normally. Define normally. Without acting like I have a restraining order. That narrows it down. I almost smiled again. That was becoming a problem. At the stairs, he stopped. For what it's worth, I should have asked sooner. I looked at him. About what? Whether you wanted me around. No defense. No explanation about how everyone else chased him. So he assumed I was playing some complicated version of the same game. Just a fact he apparently wasn't asking me to forgive. My instinct was to make it easy by dismissing the whole conversation, or make it clean by telling him it changed nothing. Instead, I chose something less comfortable. Yeah, I said. You should have. Rowan nodded. Okay. Still hate that word. Noted. My phone buzzed before either of us could say more. Hale had sent one new file from systems, the controller's response profile for Rowan's exercises. I opened it. Most of the routing parameters were standard. One wasn't. Beside Rowan's identification code was an adaptive priority flag, active since the beginning of term. I didn't know what it did, and neither did Rowan. His expression made that clear. But the activation date was 2 weeks before the first delayed warning and before I had ever been paired with him. Whatever was happening had started long before Rowan began chasing me through Northbridge. Hale's message appeared beneath the file. Don't touch the controller. Systems is tracing who authorized that flag. I looked from the screen to Rowan. Avoiding him had once seemed like the simplest way to keep control of my own life. Now someone had been altering the way the Academy's system responded to him for months, and the first evidence I trusted had come from working beside him instead of walking away. By the next morning, systems had turned our discovery into a restriction. Rowan's identification code was temporarily blocked from adaptive response drills, which meant Hale couldn't run our paired simulation until the priority flag was explained. So we found the problem and got benched for it, I said. Hale stood outside the locked simulation lab with his tablet tucked under one arm. You found evidence of a problem. Different thing. Rowan looked through the glass at the dark consoles. Did systems trace the authorization? They traced the request that activated it. Hale's expression told me the answer had made things worse. The request came through the performance program. Rowan went still. That was the program responsible for the Alpha ranking exhibition, the same exhibition he had withdrawn from yesterday morning. I looked at him. You knew they were connected. I suspected. That's not what I asked. Hale cut in before Rowan could answer. Vale reported irregular response scoring last week. He withdrew after the program asked him to continue competing while they reviewed it internally. That was new and irritatingly specific. Rowan hadn't abandoned the exhibition because he was bored, dramatic, or trying to make some statement everyone would notice. He had walked away from the thing half the Academy wanted from him because he didn't trust the system measuring it. I turned on him. You could have told me that. You told me to stop chasing you. That did not mean stop communicating relevant safety information. I know that now. The answer was calm, which somehow made me angrier. Part of me wanted to walk away and let Hale and systems handle everything. That was still the cleanest option. Rowan had withheld something. I had been right not to trust him completely. So when Hale said, I need one of you to review the archived partner reports while systems audits the performance program, I said, Rowan can do it. Hale's eyes narrowed. Why Rowan? They're his records. And you found the timing pattern. Then I've done my part. Rowan didn't argue. He just nodded once. I'll handle it. That should have felt like relief. Instead, 40 minutes later, it cost us our first real chance at an answer. I was halfway through tactical theory when Hale sent a message ordering me back to the review room. When I arrived, Rowan was standing beside a blank terminal. What happened? I asked. Hale answered. Systems revoked Vale's archive access the moment he opened the performance program reports. Why? Automatic conflict restriction. He's the subject of the audit. I stared at the dead screen. If I had stayed, my access would still have worked. Hale apparently read that on my face. Your decision made sense if this was only Vale's problem, he said. It isn't. There was no lecture in his tone. He didn't need one. I had wanted distance so badly that I had handed away access to evidence I was uniquely positioned to examine. The old strategy had finally produced a measurable cost. Restore mine, I said. Hale did. That was my next choice. Not trust. Not forgiveness. Participation. I sat at the terminal while Rowan moved to the opposite side of the table without being asked. The archive partner reports sharpened the pattern. The warnings appeared when Rowan abandoned his predicted route after a partner requested help, froze, or lost an evacuation lane. Each flag briefly lowered his efficiency score. If the exhibition used the same response model, Rowan had been right not to trust the ranking. That answered why he withdrew. It still didn't tell us who created the profile, or why. I kept reading. Halfway through the partner reports, I found my own name. My stomach tightened. Why am I in here? Rowan came around the table, then stopped before entering my space. I turned the monitor so he could see. Our practicum pairing had been approved 3 weeks earlier by the performance program, not Hale. Beside my name, high variance partner response recommended for adaptive validation. The timing hit hard. 3 weeks ago, the program paired us. 3 weeks ago, Rowan started appearing around me. The ugly explanation arrived immediately. Maybe I had been part of a test he knew about. Did you know they chose me? I asked. No. Did you know they were evaluating your partners? No. Then why did you start following me right after we were paired? Rowan's face changed. Not guilt exactly, but enough hesitation to hit every defensive instinct I had. Because you were the first person here who kept walking away from me. There it was. The answer I had expected all along. So it was a chase. At first, he exhaled. Yeah, I wanted to know why you wanted nothing from me. I pushed back from the terminal. That is not better. I know. Do you? I do now. I stood. Rowan didn't block me. That should have mattered. Right then, it didn't. The evidence had complicated my old interpretation, but this pulled one part back into focus. Rowan really had pursued me because I resisted him. Stopping when I finally said no didn't erase how it started. I need air. Rowan stayed where he was. Okay. I made it to the door before Hale said, Mercer, if you leave, I need your access session closed. My hand stayed on the handle. Leaving meant protecting the boundary I knew how to protect. It also meant losing the only active access we had to the reports. I hated that those two things had become tangled. I turned around. 5 minutes, I said. Then we finished the review. Rowan nodded and looked away, giving me the room without taking the work from me. That was the contradiction I couldn't make disappear. His original pursuit had crossed a line, but the Rowan standing here was respecting one. After 5 minutes, I came back. We worked without jokes, without pretending the conversation hadn't happened. Near the end of the archive, we found the older source profile. It predated the exhibition, our pairing, even Rowan noticing me. Most of the authorization history was restricted, but one line remained. Purpose classification, predictive intervention compliance. Rowan read it twice. They weren't measuring my score. Not only your score. The system was testing whether Rowan would obey a predicted route when another person needed him elsewhere. We finally knew what the flag reacted to. We still didn't know why anyone had built the profile in the first place. Then Hale's tablet chimed. He read the message and looked at us. Systems found the original authorization file. I waited. And Hale turned the tablet face down. You're both coming with me. For the first time, I felt like we were one document away from understanding why the Academy had been predicting Rowan's choices long before either of us knew there was something to question. Hale didn't take us to systems. He took us downstairs, past the training floors, to records review, where a compliance officer had already projected the original authorization file across the wall. The first line killed the theory I'd been building. Rowan's profile had not been created to rank him or manipulate our pairing. It came from an older evaluation documenting one repeated problem. When Rowan believed another cadet was in immediate danger, he left his assigned route before command verified the threat. The system wasn't predicting whether Rowan would win. It was predicting whether Rowan would disobey. I looked at him. He didn't look surprised enough. You knew about the evaluation. I knew I'd been written up. For what? The officer expanded the archived record. Rowan had left an assigned extraction route during an earlier advanced response drill after another cadet's evacuation signal appeared outside his sector. He reached the cadet. He also broke command protocol doing it. The profile came afterward, predictive intervention compliance. Suddenly, every warning we'd found made sense. The system reacted when Rowan's behavior matched that old pattern, when another person's distress pulled him away from the route it expected him to follow. The ranking program later inherited the profile, and my response data made me a useful stress variable for it. I wasn't bait. That distinction still didn't make me feel better. So they put us together to see whether I'd destabilize his compliance score. Hale's jaw tightened. That appears to be the reason the program selected the pairing. And nobody thought we should know? I didn't know, Hale said. That mattered. I believed him because the approval record showed his authorization came after the pairing had already been generated. Rowan stepped closer to the display, not to me. The warnings started before the exhibition. Yes, the officer said. The exhibition didn't create the profile. It exposed how heavily the ranking model depended on it. There was the reframe. Rowan hadn't withdrawn because he couldn't tolerate being measured. He had withdrawn because the Academy was rewarding obedience using a model built from the moment he had chosen a person over a route. And I had spent days interpreting his refusal to play along as another version of entitlement. The evidence didn't make him innocent of everything. He had still chased my attention because I denied it. He had still withheld what he suspected. But those facts no longer explained the larger problem. Why didn't you tell me about the original write-up? I asked. Rowan took a second. Because I thought it proved their point. Meaning, that I make bad calls when somebody needs help. He stopped there. No speech. No defense. Just the old report glowing behind him and the fact that every later warning had been built on the same assumption. I understood something uncomfortable. I had been doing my own version of that. Taking the first behavior that hurt or irritated me, building a model around it, then treating every later action as confirmation. The difference was that Rowan had actually given me reasons to be cautious. That kept the recognition from becoming forgiveness. Good. I wasn't ready for forgiveness. Show us the pairing authorization, I said. The pairing record translated my Academy profile into something simpler. I ignored peer status and changed routes more than the model liked. So every time I did something unpredictable, it watched whether Rowan stayed assigned or intervened. The officer nodded. And intervention lowered his efficiency until review. Rowan's withdrawal snapped fully into place. The ranking wasn't merely measuring performance. For him, it was quietly rewarding predictability. But it created a practical one. Can the profile still affect live training? The officer hesitated. Hale answered first. Yes. That changed everything. This wasn't an old scoring dispute anymore. If Rowan entered an adaptive drill, the system could still alter his evaluation based on a behavioral profile neither of us had known was active. Then we stop. Treating the warnings like glitches, I said. We map exactly what triggers them. Rowan looked at me. We. Yesterday, I would have hated that single word. Maybe I still did a little. Don't make it weird. Wouldn't dream of it. That was a lie. A small one. The officer cleared her throat. For the record, your access to the underlying model is restricted. We don't need the model, I said. We have the reports. Hale caught on immediately. Compare the intervention events. Find what changes immediately before each flag. Rowan nodded. Then test whether the trigger is the distress signal, the route deviation, or the decision to assist. That was the first time we had built a strategy together instead of reacting to somebody else's system. And I noticed something else. Rowan didn't assume I would help. He waited. That tiny pause mattered more than I wanted it to. I'll do the comparison, I said. You reconstruct your decisions from the flag drills. Separately first. Rowan accepted the boundary without negotiation. Okay. And if something doesn't match your memory, you tell me. You don't decide what information I can handle. His expression tightened. Okay. It wasn't trust. It was a condition under which trust might become possible. Our comparison settled one crucial point. In a session where Rowan received a distress cue but stayed assigned, no warning appeared. The flag triggered only when he actually left the route. So it isn't reacting to danger, I said. It's reacting to my decision. The model wasn't detecting need. It was detecting disobedience. Hale requested a controlled verification run for the following morning. Systems approved it, with one condition. Rowan could participate, but because my response variance was part of the original pairing logic, I had to enter the simulation with him. Rowan immediately said, "No, the old version of our dynamic flashed back so fast, it almost made me laugh. Him deciding for me. Me leaving because I refused to be decided for." I looked at Hale. "What's the actual risk? The drill itself is standard. The evaluation behavior is what we're testing." I turned to Rowan. "Then you don't get to answer for me." His jaw worked once. For a second, I expected resistance. Instead, he stepped back. "You're right. Not growth completed. Not some miraculous personality transplant." He looked like every instinct in him still wanted to keep me out of the test. He simply didn't act on that instinct. I faced Hale. "I'll do it." The decision scared me for a different reason. Walking away had always been how I kept control. This time, I was choosing to stay close enough to verify the truth myself, but on terms I had helped set. Hale confirmed the run. Tomorrow, Rowan and I would enter the same adaptive system that had been quietly judging his choices for months. And for the first time, we would know exactly what question we were forcing it to answer. By 8 the next morning, the controlled verification run had already stopped being controlled. Hale met us outside the adaptive lab with a tablet in one hand and the expression of a man who had spent the night arguing with people above his pay grade. "Performance oversight froze direct access to Rowan's intervention profile," he said. "They approved yesterday's test, then restricted the underlying event log at 6:14 this morning." Rowan's mouth flattened. "Convenient." "Not entirely." Hale turned the tablet toward us. The simulation authorization was still valid. They could hide the old profile, but they couldn't stop today's run from recording what it did without canceling the test entirely. I looked at Rowan. "Then we stopped trying to prove what the profile says." He caught up immediately. "We prove what it does." That became the objective. Generate a clean comparison the Academy couldn't dismiss. Hale proposed scripting one run where Rowan stayed assigned and one where he deviated. "No," I said. "If he knows which behavior we need, he'll be performing for the test. Let the decision happen naturally. I control my route. Rowan responds to what he actually sees." The idea meant giving up something I normally guarded like oxygen, control over how another person would respond to me. Worse, it meant trusting Rowan not to turn protection into permission. My first instinct was to redesign the test until nobody could surprise me. I didn't. Hale studied me, then changed the protocol. Mercer gets independent route authority. Rowan receives no instruction beyond his assigned objective. Rowan said, "Agreed." No argument. No protective veto. That mattered because 10 minutes later the simulation gave him every reason to break the agreement. My corridor sealed during a staged structural failure. Exactly the kind of event the adaptive system used to force rerouting. I knew it was simulated, but the physical barrier was real enough that I had to clear it manually. Rowan's voice came through comms. "Status. Blocked, not trapped. Can you clear it?" "Yes." A pause. Old Rowan would have been moving before I finished the sentence. I knew that. He knew I knew it. "Copy," he said, and stayed on his route. I cleared the panel myself. No warning appeared. That was our first clean result. More importantly, Rowan had asked what I needed instead of deciding it. "Try not to sound so disappointed," he said when we regrouped at the junction. "I'm devastated. I had a whole rescue speech prepared. Was I handsome in it? You weren't conscious. Cruel." The joke lasted exactly until the second event fired. This time the system dropped my route clearance and marked my section for assisted extraction. Rowan saw the same status on his display. He had two choices: remain on his assigned path and preserve compliance, or leave it and reach me before the simulated hazard window closed. He looked at me across the junction. "Can you self-extract?" I checked the manual release. Locked by the scenario. Not before the timer. He moved. The instant his boot crossed the route boundary, his wrist display flashed amber. Intervention deviation. Efficiency adjustment pending. There it was. Not theory. Not an archived interpretation. The system had penalized the decision itself. Rowan reached my section, completed the assisted release exactly according to emergency procedure, and the simulation marked my extraction successful. His performance score still dropped. Hale ended the run before the next sequence. That's enough. In review, the contradictions sat side by side. When Rowan respected my self-assessment and stayed assigned, no flag. When the scenario required assistance and Rowan performed the correct extraction, the profile penalized him anyway. Save the timestamps and the successful extraction result, I said. If they call it reckless, that result matters. Rowan looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite name. You caught that fast. I'm annoying when properly motivated. You're annoying recreationally. And yet you keep showing up. His answer died before it reached his mouth because Hale's tablet chimed. The review request had been denied. Not the evidence. The request to suspend Rowan's profile while it was investigated. Performance oversight cited continuity of evaluation standards. Rowan stared at the notice. So tomorrow's live assessment still uses it. Unless we get an independent review before then, Hale said. That was the fallout. We had proved the mechanism, and the proof had made the deadline real. Rowan could withdraw again, protecting himself from a score built on the profile, but surrendering his standing in the program. Or he could enter knowing the system might punish any intervention decision it classified as deviation. I could feel my old solution waiting, step away. His problem, his institution, his choice. Distance was clean. Distance couldn't trap me. Then Rowan said, Mercer doesn't need to be involved tomorrow. There it was again, the reflex. Decide for me, call it protection. My shoulders went tight. He saw it happen. Sorry. He corrected himself before I could. Mercer decides whether he's involved tomorrow. It was small. It also wasn't. I looked back at the records. Who can independently review a live evaluation flag? Hale explained that an independent challenge needed a reproducible contradiction between the penalty and an authorized safety outcome. We already had it. Then don't argue that the model dislikes Rowan, I said. Show that a valid safety response produced the penalty. Hale nodded. That gives review something testable. Rowan added. And tomorrow, if the same contradiction happens live, it becomes a third data point. I didn't like where that led. You're suggesting we let the system flag you again. I'm saying, I won't manufacture one. But I'm also not going to ignore a legitimate intervention just to protect the score. That was the harder test waiting for us. I copied the verified comparison to the authorized review packet, putting my own name on the submission instead of letting Hale carry it alone. The moment I confirmed it, the system marked me as a participating witness in Rowan's evaluation challenge. I had spent most of this story refusing to let someone else's choices become my responsibility. Now I had chosen responsibility for my own evidence, and that meant I couldn't pretend tomorrow had nothing to do with me. Then Hale opened the live assessment roster. Rowan's name was still there. So was mine. The live assessment gave me exactly one clean way out. I saw it on the review screen before Hale even finished explaining the options. Performance oversight had accepted our evidence packet, but refused to suspend Rowan's adaptive profile before the run. Their compromise was simple: remove me from his assessment. If I stepped out, Rowan could run a standard route without my unpredictability affecting the score, and the challenge could continue on archived evidence. Practical, safe, familiar. Mercer can withdraw without penalty, the compliance officer said. Rowan looked at me, but didn't say anything. That silence was harder than an argument. A month ago, I would have taken the exit before anyone finished offering it. Distance meant nobody else's decisions could become my problem. Now my name was already on the challenge because I had chosen to submit the evidence myself. Walking away would protect me from the assessment, but it would also turn the clean comparison we had built into an argument about conditions that no longer existed. If I withdraw, does today still test the same pairing logic? I asked. The officer hesitated. Not exactly. Then I'm staying. Rowan's expression tightened. Eli, you don't get to answer this one. He stopped. That mattered. Okay. Hale started the run. The first phase was ordinary. Route timing, extraction windows, independent decisions. I handled deployment. Rowan stayed on response. We were good together now because neither of us had to fight for control of the same decision. Then the system created the situation we had expected. My route locked. The display marked my section as delayed but self-recoverable. Rowan checked my status through comms. Need me? No, he stayed assigned. No warning. We cleared the phase. Hale's voice came over the channel. Clean event. Continue. Small victory. Real evidence. The second phase was worse. My section lost manual release and shifted to assisted extraction. Rowan saw it. So did the system. I knew what came next because we had already proved it yesterday. Can you clear? He asked. I tried the release anyway. No, Rowan left his route. Amber flashed across his display immediately. Intervention deviation. Efficiency adjustment pending. He reached me, completed the authorized extraction, and the system marked the rescue successful while cutting his efficiency score at the same time. We had the contradiction again, live and impossible to dismiss. Hale ended the phase, but the compliance officer ordered the assessment to continue because the profile remained Rowan's official evaluation standard. They weren't denying our evidence. They were deciding it didn't matter yet. Hale cut in. You have the verified comparison, and review has not concluded. Rowan's score remained reduced. The next phase loaded. I saw the trap immediately. If Rowan kept responding to legitimate assistance cues, the profile could keep penalizing him. If he ignored them, he could preserve his ranking by behaving exactly the way the model wanted. Rowan knew it too. I can withdraw, he said. The words landed harder than I expected. He had already withdrawn from the exhibition once rather than accept a score he didn't trust. Doing it again would protect him from the system. It would also surrender the live evidence we needed. If you leave now, I said, they'll say the profile was never fully tested. If I stay, they get to keep scoring me with it. Neither option was clean. That was the point. Hale gave us 30 seconds before the next phase. Rowan stepped closer to the boundary line between our stations, then stopped. What do you want to do? Not what should we do? Not what he had decided was safest for me. He asked. I looked at the review packet indicator on my console. My witness status was still active. The live event data was already attached. We didn't need to manufacture another warning. We only needed to preserve what had happened. Finish the assessment, I said. But don't chase the score. Rowan understood. Respond to the scenario. Exactly. That was the plan we had built together from evidence we had already earned. No new trick. No miracle. Just refusing to let the model define success for us. The final phase loaded. Rowan lost points twice more because he followed valid assistance conditions that required leaving his predicted route. Each time, I logged the valid outcome, and Hale confirmed the action was correct. By the end, Rowan's official efficiency rank had dropped from 1st to 5th. The room went quiet when the board updated. Half the academy had spent the term chasing the strongest alpha. Now the scoreboard was telling everyone he wasn't the strongest anymore. Rowan looked at it once, then at me. You okay? I almost laughed. His ranking had just taken the hit, and he was asking about me. Are you? Ask me later. That answer told me enough. The compliance officer confirmed that 4 reproducible contradictions would go to independent review that day. Not victory. Enough. My choice to stay had mattered. So had Rowan's choice not to protect his score by becoming the version of himself the profile demanded. The reward should have felt clean. Then we walked out of the assessment hall and found a crowd waiting. News of Rowan's ranking drop had already spread. Questions came from every direction. Why had he fallen? Had something gone wrong? Was I involved? Someone called out. Mercer, did Vale tank his score because of you? Every old instinct came back at once. Too many people looking. Too much attention attached to his name. Too much danger of becoming exactly what I had spent the story refusing to be, an extension of Rowan Vale's status. I stepped away from him before I thought about it. Rowan noticed. Of course he did. And because he had changed, he didn't follow. He answered one question about the formal review, refused to discuss the rest, then left the crowd without looking back at me. That was the cost I couldn't pretend away anymore. The system had offered me distance before the assessment, and I had refused it. But the second the pressure became personal instead of procedural, I reached for the same old protection anyway. Rowan had spent the day trusting me with evidence, choice, and responsibility. I had trusted him inside the simulation. Outside it, with people watching, I still let fear make the decision first. After practicum review, Hale confirmed the challenge had been accepted for independent evaluation. Rowan's ranking would remain reduced until the review finished. He could have stayed to argue. He didn't. He packed his notes and walked toward the field hall doors alone. I watched him go. The easy choice was still available. Let him leave. Tell myself the assessment had been the important part, that we had done good work, that whatever existed between us was too complicated under this much attention. Nobody would stop me. Rowan certainly wouldn't. That was the problem. He had finally learned to leave the distance where I put it. If I kept putting it there every time I got scared, eventually there would be nothing left for him to do but respect it. Rowan reached the doors. I stood up. I wasn't ready to call that courage yet. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he walked away this time, it would be because I had chosen silence. And I was running out of ways to pretend silence wasn't a choice. I caught Rowan before the field hall doors closed behind him. Wait. He stopped. A month ago, that would have been enough for me to feel trapped by my own decision. This time I kept moving until I was standing in front of him. The crowd behind us was still talking about his ranking drop, the review, whether I had caused any of it. I could feel every reason to leave. Public attention. Uncertainty. The clean safety of letting Rowan walk away before this became something I couldn't control. Instead, I held up my tablet. The review packet is still open. Rowan looked from the screen to me. Hale said independent review has it. They have the challenge. They don't have my final witness statement. That was the one piece still mine. I had submitted the evidence, stayed in the live assessment, and watched Rowan take 4 penalties for valid interventions. The witness record still required me to certify what I had actually observed before review could treat it as first-hand testimony. Rowan's expression tightened. You don't have to do that because of me. I know. That was exactly why I needed to do it. We went back inside. Hale was still at the review table with the same compliance officer. The officer looked surprised when I returned. Mercer, my witness statement. I sat down before I could find another excuse. The form was already attached to our challenge. No new mechanism, just the last responsibility I had voluntarily put my name on. The first questions were simple. Had the flagged deviations occurred, and had the interventions matched authorized safety conditions? Yes. Then came the one that mattered. Did the live events reproduce the contradiction from the controlled run? My hand stopped over the confirmation field. If I signed it, I became part of the record attached to Rowan's challenge. Not privately, not in a quiet cafe where nobody cared. Officially, the same academy that watched Rowan like his ranking belonged to them would know I had stood beside him while he challenged the system measuring him. Walking away was still possible. I could tell myself I had done enough. Hale had the timestamps. Rowan had his own testimony. The outcome might even be the same eventually. But the cleanest evidence existed because I had chosen to stay when the system offered me an exit. Leaving my name off now would protect me from exactly the kind of attention I had feared from the beginning. It would also make my choices disappear the moment they became visible. I pressed confirm. The statement locked. The review packet changed status. Complete. Independent evaluation active. Rowan said nothing. He didn't thank me like I had done him a favor. He didn't reach for me. He just stood beside the table and let the decision remain mine even after I had made it. The compliance officer reviewed the completed packet and reminded Rowan that his ranking adjustment remained until review ruled on the profile. He nodded. Understood. You can still withdraw the challenge. I looked at him. There it was, his version of the easy choice. Keep the lowered rank. End the fight. Stop giving the academy access to a decision pattern he had spent months being judged for. Rowan looked at the completed packet, then at me. He didn't ask what I wanted him to do. Good. This choice was his. No, he said. Keep it active. The officer nodded and sent the file. That was Rowan's part of the climax. Not controlling my decision, not retreating from his own. Mine came next. The officer turned back to me. Because you're listed as the high-variance partner used in the validation pairing, Oversight may request clarification about your interaction with Vale. There it was again. The pressure the system had been using from the start reduced me to a variable in Rowan's profile. The safer answer was to keep this technical. Say we were paired by the program. Say we completed training. Nothing more. Instead, I asked, will they ask whether he interfered with my decisions? Possibly. Good. Rowan looked at me sharply. Eli. No. I kept my attention on the officer. If they ask, I want the record to show the distinction. What distinction? When I told Rowan I needed space, he eventually stopped approaching me. During the controlled run, when I said I could clear my own route, he stayed assigned. During the live run, when the system marked assisted extraction as required, he intervened. I pointed to the 4 event records already in the packet. Those aren't the same behavior. I wasn't explaining our relationship to strangers. I was challenging the assumption underneath the profile. Deviation did not automatically mean disregard for another person's choice. Sometimes Rowan moved because help was required. Sometimes he stayed because I said I didn't need him. The system had flattened those into one compliance problem. The officer read the records again. You're saying the profile evaluates route obedience without distinguishing whether intervention was requested or required. I'm saying that's what these events show. Hill looked almost pleased. Rowan just looked stunned. That was the decisive mechanism. Not a hidden exploit. Not a new rule. The same comparison we had spent 3 parts building, applied to the one distinction the model kept flattening. The officer added my clarification to the challenge. 10 minutes later, independent review requested immediate suspension of the adaptive profile pending audit. The live record showed it could penalize 2 opposite forms of appropriate behavior, respecting a self-recovery decision and responding to required assistance. The model could no longer claim it measured safe intervention consistently. Rowan's score would be recalculated without the adaptive penalties. The performance program lost control of the evaluation for one simple reason. Its own records contradicted the meaning it had assigned to Rowan's choices. My first feeling was relief. My second was something quieter. I had spent weeks believing control meant never letting another person's orbit become part of my life. Yet the thing that resolved this had not been Rowan taking over or me disappearing. It had been both of us making separate choices and allowing those choices to remain separate long enough for the evidence to mean something. Hale left with the officer to finalize the suspension. Rowan and I were alone beside the dark review screens. You didn't have to put the personal part in the record, he said. I didn't. You kind of did. I put behavior in the record. You told oversight I stopped chasing you. Technically, I said you eventually learned how to listen. His mouth twitched. Then the humor disappeared. Eli, outside just now, you stepped away. I looked toward the doors. The crowd was mostly gone. I know. If that's still what you need, it isn't. The answer came before fear could edit it. That was the behavioral difference. Old me would have asked for time, distance, another excuse to keep the possibility safe without actually choosing it. Instead, I walked toward him. Rowan stayed still. Of course he did. I stepped away because everyone was looking, I said. And for about 5 minutes, that felt easier than letting them see I chose to stand next to you. His face changed, but he didn't rescue me from the silence. Then I came back. I took another step. That part matters more. Rowan's hands remained at his sides. What do you want me to do? Not what should happen. Not what he thought I needed. The question was mine. Nothing. I closed the rest of the distance myself. Just stay there. Rowan did. That was the climax. Not winning back his ranking. Not beating the profile. Those things had already been decided by evidence. The real outcome was that the moment every old instinct offered me distance, I chose visibility, responsibility, and him, without giving up the right to choose any of it. Rowan didn't turn that into possession. He simply waited until I reached for his hand first. The first thing that changed after I chose Rowan in that review room was that nothing became automatic. By the next morning, independent review had suspended his adaptive profile and recalculated the live assessment without the intervention penalties. His ranking moved back where it belonged, not because someone handed him a favor, but because the evidence we had built survived scrutiny. Hale sent the corrected evaluation before first period. Rowan forwarded it to me with one line. Looks less stupid now. I answered, marginally. That was all. No victory speech. No sudden assumption that because I had taken his hand once, I had signed away every boundary I had spent weeks fighting to understand. When I reached the library, Rowan was waiting near the same stone column where this whole mess had started. He looked up. Morning. Morning. Then he stayed exactly where he was. I stopped a few feet away. You're not walking with me? His expression shifted. Do you want me to? 3 weeks ago, that question would have felt ridiculous. Now it felt like the whole point. Yeah, I said. I do. Rowan pushed away from the column and fell into step beside me. We made it halfway down the corridor before 2 students recognized him and immediately started talking about the ranking review. One congratulated him. The other asked whether the performance program had targeted him. Rowan gave them the only answer he actually owed them. The evaluation was corrected. Nothing about me. Nothing about our evidence packet. Nothing that turned my choice in the review room into public property. When they left, I looked at him. That's it. That's it. You could have made yourself sound heroic. Would you have believed me? Absolutely not. Then I saved us both time. I laughed, and the sound didn't feel defensive anymore. The academy hadn't changed. People still watched Rowan and wanted his attention. The difference was that being beside him no longer meant being dragged into whatever everyone else expected his life to be. At Tactical Practicum that afternoon, Hale ran our final paired evaluation without the adaptive profile. When my route developed a bottleneck, Rowan asked, "Want my read?" I said yes. Later I caught a conflict on his side and redirected him. He followed without hesitation. Hill looked at our final score. That's what the pairing was supposed to look like before everybody made my semester difficult. Rowan gave me the credit. It reminded me of the first practicum note he had written when I wasn't there to hear it. What once felt like surprising evidence now felt ordinary. Not because it mattered less, but because trust had stopped feeling accidental. After practicum, Mason caught us outside the field hall. So are you two finally going to make everyone's lives easier and admit this is a thing? The old panic showed up. Smaller, but real. I felt it before I answered. Rowan didn't. That mattered. He looked at me and waited. No rescue. No claim. No joke made on my behalf. I could have denied everything and bought myself another week of clean, private uncertainty. Instead, I said, "We're figuring it out." Mason stared at me. That is disturbingly mature. I'm taking it back. Too late. Rowan looked suspiciously pleased. Don't. I warned. I didn't say anything. Your face did. Sounds like a you problem. The ease between us made the answer feel lighter, but not less real. I had chosen visibility once when it cost me something. Doing it again was easier. Not easy. Easier. That difference was enough. We went for coffee afterward. Rowan ordered the same. Terrible drink. They still haven't banned that. It's coffee. It's a workplace incident. He smiled into the cup. There was no talk about destiny. Rowan asked before assuming. I answered instead of expecting him to decode every silence. When I needed space, I said so. When I wanted him closer, I learned that saying that counted too. On the walk back, we reached the junction where I used to take the longer corridor just to avoid him. Rowan slowed automatically. Left or right, he asked. He still asked. That was his growth, living in something as small as a direction. I looked at the left corridor, the old escape route, then at the shorter path beside him. Same way as you. He nodded, but waited for me to move first. We walked toward the library as the campus quieted around us. Near the steps, his hand brushed mine and pulled back immediately. I looked at the space between us. For a month, that space had been something we fought over without admitting it. Rowan kept trying to close it. I kept restoring it. Then he stopped chasing me, and I finally had to decide what I wanted when nobody else was moving the line. I hooked my fingers through his. Rowan looked down, then at me. You sure? You asked that a lot now. You complained when I didn't. Fair. His fingers closed around mine. Warm. Careful. No victory in it. Just an answer to the choice I had actually made. We stopped outside the same library where I had once changed routes just to keep him from finding me. Rowan loosened his hand first. I should go. I knew he would if I let him. No chase. No punishment. No assumption that choosing him once meant choosing him forever. He started to step back. I held on. Stay another minute. Rowan stayed. He didn't move closer. He didn't have to. The space between us was still mine whenever I needed it, and his whenever he did. That was why neither of us had to guard it anymore. Rowan Vale finally stopped chasing me. I was the one who closed the distance. And with that, we can leave Mercer and Rowan exactly where their story belongs. I'm curious about one choice in particular. If you were Mercer, after everything that happened, would you have trusted Rowan enough to choose him freely, or would you have needed more time before closing that distance? Tell me where you land, and what would have mattered most in making that decision. If you enjoyed this kind of slow burn M/M romance with tension, trust, and an earned emotional payoff, a like and subscribe would mean a lot and help you find the next story. Thank you, genuinely, for spending this time with me and listening all the way through. Wherever you're listening from, I hope the days ahead bring you good health, a little more peace, and plenty of reasons to smile. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.